consumers are getting more sophisticated, and they're understanding as they sit in their cars for an hour and a half on the way home to see their children, and they get home and their children are already asleep, that they've been sold a lifestyle that isn't all that it was cracked up to be.
I was in critical mass for the first time this week. I went because I'm stuck in traffic every day, and I see the destruction. I want to get out of my car. I want some way, an alternative. And I went as a protest. That's why I went. When I was there, it was absolutely fantastic.
I saw this thing happening, and it was just such a good feeling to be there, and it had so many right-on messages, and it was like the perfect combination of do what you want to do, but be a nice person.
Last Friday of the month, bicycle ride to celebrate the bicycle and to dominate the streets for a change, to experience what it's like to be in the majority, to experience what it's like to feel safe and surrounded by fellow cyclists. That's what critical mass is.
It was great because then people would notice bicyclists, that we do exist, whereas before, bicyclists were just kind of a rare anomaly, an annoyance out on the streets. And it was a situation where we were very visible. We obviously knew what we were doing. We were taking control of the situation, and people started noticing us.
I didn't count on the cop participation and how overwhelming that would get to be, and that it would be so big in the, powers eyes that it would actually need to be contained. Like that whole dynamic I did not envision. I didn't think we'd be like, riot in San Francisco, newsworthy top headline kind of stuff. I'd always pictured it just kind of eventually growing and growing, and of course you daydream about the utopia society where everybody just rides their bike to work, and of course I thought that critical mass would do that.
The notion of public space was also important to see if we could establish something on the street, a space where people could get in front of each other and actually converse and talk and interact. And the streets had become not so much a place that was had any community anymore. It was only a place to drive, and everybody's driving and everybody's in their car, and it's pretty much the same as the next car, and it's the same steering wheel, go home to see the same sitcom and everything, but everybody's doing the same thing, but they're doing it alone. And if we could get out in the bikes and be in the streets, dozens, hundreds strong, well then there's something happening there. There's a space created that, it's temporary and it's even moving. And it was an experiment.
People always assume that critical mass is fundamentally and crucially about bicycling. Well, yes, it is. It's sort of inescapably about bicycling, but to reduce it to bicycling is also to miss the crucial elements of it. This exhilaration, this open-endedness, the human creativity that was sort of unleashed by this experience, I think has as much or more to do, really more to do, with being a new kind of public space.
I almost crashed.
I think it was all about, can we get some people to come out and be together and actually meet up at the same time in the same place. That alone was like, who knows, maybe they'll come, maybe they won't. Maybe we'll come, maybe we won't, we didn't really know.
I mean, we just talked about it for a long time, and then Chris started handing out some flyers on 7th and Market, and we started making more propaganda pieces, and We started the commute clot in September of 1992. And it was a commute clot for a couple of months at about 30, 40, 50, 60 riders each month, somewhere in there. And then we saw the movie Return of the Scorcher. And the name had to become Critical Mass. Scene in there is about the bike riding in China.
Buses, taxi cabs, and motorcycles coming through intersections with no traffic lights. And this kind of innate ability that they've developed over time to make that work. But there were rules operating under the surface that worked very well. And it was a kind of critical mass thing where all the cyclists would pile up and then go. All the cyclists going, say, turning left in an intersection would wait in the middle until they had enough numbers to force through the cars and make them stop.
And as soon as they reached what this interviewee had called critical mass, then the bikes went through. And that just captured the spirit perfectly. So it became critical mass right then.
There's 200 of us this time. 190. Rad. It's a big ride.
Well, first off, Critical Mass was just created as a social space. There was no real objective except to ride home together. But a lot of times you did a circuitous route and you just enjoyed people's company. And that was the whole thing. You got to keep the ride fun or people aren't going to keep returning. So you don't want this political dogma to wear people down. You just want to make it fun, and whoever wants to bring their political dogma and have their political dogma subset group did it.
There isn't a commercial interest. There isn't any one group that Critical Mass is trying to appeal towards. I think the fact that it's done this has really helped it be inclusive, that there is no other requirement than that you bring a bike, which is probably one of the most simplest things around.
Yeah, cruiser power. Yeah, totally. Single speed, love it.
You're not contributing to buying oil or gasoline, and so you're making a statement about that. It's part of the environmental movement, again, because you're not using a car and you're not polluting the earth. You're not contributing to paving and destroying the environment that way. I find it very empowering because you're sort of taking back territory and you're reclaiming part of public property that usually isn't yours, because bikes are so forgotten when it comes to the street. It's like a Take Back the Night March for me. You're like reclaiming this territory that singly, by yourself, alone, which is usually the way that I ride by myself, that's not my space. I feel afraid, I get harassed, I am not welcome there. And that's what bicycling and Critical Mass represent for me.
So I think in terms of fine-tuning the experience, it was about what can we do to maximize our safety as we do this rather unusual thing, fill the streets with bikes, which led me right away to say, well, the red lights are obviously not relevant to us, other than if you come up to a red light, you better stop. But if you come up to an intersection and you enter it and the light turns red, the safe thing to do is for the bikes to stick together. And so there was a whole concept of trying to stick together and hold the density of the mass together, and to protect us from the side traffic, which is where the whole corking concept started.
So we would get off our bikes and stop right in front of the first car and talk to the people in the car. And usually you could get a conversation going with them, and it was all it took, 2 minutes, one light usually, and everybody was passed. And if there was people honking in the background, it was kind of a problem. So we made signs that said, "Thanks for waiting," on one side. And when the honking started, we turned it over, and on the other side it said, yeah, "Honk if you love bicycles."
So then, like the whole string of cars, you could just see them all start laughing inside.